The first dream job of many American preteen and teen girls is a babysitter. It's a great way to prove responsibility, be a positive role model for future generations, and earn cash along the way. But long before these rites of passage are even considered, girls and boys, still in elementary school, long to organize their first lemonade stand. Lemonade stands signal newfound independence. They prove that little kids can do something on their own that can bring joy to people of all ages. Who can't be happy about getting a cold sip of lemonade, especially on a hot day? I know about a 7-year-old little girl who had longed to host a lemonade sale in her yard for more than a year. She would ask her mom quite often, but for whatever reason, they didn't make time to let her do it. Finally, in summer of 2012, a few months before she turned 8 years old, her mother finally agreed to let her have the lemonade sale in the driveway. The girl recruited 3 friends to help her plan the event. They convinced their families to donate the cups, napkins, and ingredients. The girls also recruited their families as helpers and supporters. Their families told their friends, who brought their families to support the lemonade sale. Before long, the workers had grown to 20 people, and the supporters had grown to too many to count. The little girls told passers-by about their sale, and cars started lining the street with patrons eager to purchase a cup of lemonade. Research shows on average, a 12-ounce cup of lemonade costs about $1 each. So, if a new customer purchased at least 1 cup every 2 minutes during their 4-hour lemonade sale, the girls could have expected to earn $120 for their sale. But they raised $633. They donated all of the money raised to organizations that help child cancer patients. That little girl was me. Shortly after my 7th birthday, I was diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I was very confused and I had no idea what cancer was or what it meant. I just knew that healing me actually caused me a lot of pain. Early in my cancer journey, I had the opportunity to help 2 little girls whose family lost everything in a fire. I gave them my brand new back-to-school clothes. After I learned how happy they were to receive them, I knew I wanted to continue to find projects and initiatives to bring happiness to some of the most vulnerable children in our communities: homeless, sick, and foster children. So, I created the We Cancerve Movement Incorporated. A little more than a year later, I was granted a Make-A-Wish trip to Disney World. I stayed at the Give Kids the World Resort, and every day after I left my villa, the Wish Fairy would enter and leave behind presents and surprises for me. Back home in Maryland, I already had tons of gifts for my parents and the hospital, so I decided to give the gifts from my Make-A-Wish trip to children who didn't have any or as many as I had. I donated them to a local homeless shelter, the Harvard Family House. The executive director at the time was one of the first adults to truly understand what I was trying to do. She got me. She understood 2 things about my drive and vision. Number 1, that I believe the best gifts for vulnerable kids are the gifts kids cherish the most. And number 2, kids can truly help kids. Shortly after that, I created an all-youth board of advisors to help me achieve my mission, which is to bring happiness to homeless, sick, and foster children, because I believe happiness shouldn't have to wait. I started off with a board of 13 youth made up of friends, youth from my church, and family friends. 3 years after that, I implemented an application process to find the best qualified candidates. I'm not aware of any other organization that has a board made up of all youth. There are a handful that I'm aware of that have 1 or 2 youth representatives who work alongside adults, but I haven't seen any structure that looks like mine. That means we had no models to emulate. That also means people often ask me advice on how to structure and operate an all-youth board. A few years ago, I named a board of directors, who are adults who help with the governance. That is, to make sure we follow various laws and other rules. But the all-youth board of advisors create, direct, plan, and execute all programs. My youth board is between the ages of 8 and 18-year-olds, and each one of them is expected to know how to make an elevator pitch, present a project proposal, present a project plan in front of our group and our parents, solicit support from businesses, recruit supporters, greet visitors and guests at our events, know the terms of agreement for partnerships I negotiate, and to adhere to them. There are two enduring questions I am often asked. Number one, how will We Cancerve continue to recruit youth to be involved in our programs and initiatives after I leave for college? And number two, what advice do I have for adult-run organizations to bring youth to the solution table? Let me start with answering the first question. I've been meeting with corporate and nonprofit mentors about this for some years now. The biggest challenge for me has been to find a model to emulate of a nonprofit started by a child that's continued when the leader grows up. I'm encouraged by the We movement out of Canada. Craig Kielburger is definitely a role model. His nonprofit is global though, and I'm not quite ready to get that big yet. So, I started doing online research to see if I could find other organizations that came before mine to figure out how those leaders continued their work after they grew up. I started asking these questions. What are some examples of successful nonprofits created and run by youth, not adults, that continued after the young founder grew up? How do these different organizations define the success of their volunteer efforts? How are their lives enriched because of the service? Finding the answers to these questions has been very tough. I haven't been successful in finding research papers on these topics. Who knows? Maybe I can pick one of these topics to focus on in my future doctoral studies. First, I need to graduate from high school. All jokes aside, I feel confident in the plans I'm making for We Cancerve, and will share that at a later date. Whatever the future is for We Cancerve, it will remain true to its intended goal. Now for the second question. I have thoughts on how adult-run organizations should invite young people to the solution table, but before I share my thoughts, I want to share what I found from research. I looked at how young people are invited to the solution table to deal with some of the biggest issues impacting today's youth. Based on my experiences working with homeless shelters, foster care group homes, hospitals, and respite care facilities, the issues that affect parents also impact their children. They just might impact the children differently. According to a December 2019 report from the Pew Research Center, the major problems facing our country are affordable health care, drug addiction, affordable college education, federal budget deficit, climate change, economic inequality, racism, illegal immigration, terrorism, sexism, and job opportunities for all Americans. While their report looked at how partisan coalitions viewed each of the major issues facing the country, I'm more interested in the idea that Pew presented a list that they defined as the major problems facing the country. So I'll go with that for this talk today. I didn't stop at just the Pew Research Center. There's lots of literature out there that basically points to racial inequality, homelessness, the economy, education, immigration, and the climate as top issues. My nonprofit's work has touch points in a few of these, to be honest. Affordable health care. We have a fund at Sinai Hospital in Baltimore to address some of the needs families who can't afford prescription and appointment copays. Drug addiction. Some of the people who are transitioning from homelessness to stable living accommodations are recovering addicts. Job opportunities. Some people we've met at the shelters are there because they've lost their jobs. And it's probably not so much that they can't find new jobs, it's just their jobs don't pay enough for them to live. It's probably more about affordable housing. I've also noticed that the issues that involve foster care don't seem to make any of the lists I've seen. The closest I've seen it represented is in categories called human rights. My go-to reference document, though, is called The State of America's Children 2020 by the Children's Defense Fund. This report covers most of the children my nonprofit serves, homeless and foster children. The report also addresses uninsured children, which I know impacts the general health of many children. Without early detection of catastrophic illness, the chances for survival can sometimes get smaller. Anyway, I really started looking at social movements, organizations, and how they engage youth on major issues, which is why I first had to look at the major issues. Social movement organizations organize people, resources, and ideas for social change. Many cover civil rights issues, human rights issues, environmental rights issues, and political issues. I learned that social movement organizations don't have a good track record of engaging young people. Trends show organizations engage youth via online, but, in quote, do a poor job of encouraging and facilitating youth engagement in offline, face-to-face contexts. These organizations are often adult-dominated, and these organizations tend to minimize the leadership and participation available to youth. But they're missing out by not bringing young people to the solution table. Here's what's gained when young people are brought to the solution table. Social movement organizations that allow for a diversity of ideology, strategy, tactics, and organizational forms within the same movement also allow these differences to attract more members. Think about my lemonade stand. I'll come back to that. This diversity also allows for a division of labor among organizations and useful collaborations. Remember how everyone had a role to play in my lemonade stand when I was 7 years old? More generally, social movement organizations ensure continuity of both themselves and the larger movement. They recruit new members as older ones leave, often targeting young people for new memberships, and young people serve as obey instructions. In other words, we often sustain and keep organizations steady when movements enter periods of low activity or hostile contexts. The advice I give to organizations that want to bring young people to the solution table is simply this. Trust that we have something of value to contribute, then remain open-minded to hear what we have to share. And this advice goes for more than social movement organizations. This goes for any organization that sees input from younger generations as being necessary and critical to their livelihood and their ability to stay operational and relevant. The tips I share with you are lessons I learned from my lemonade stand almost 10 years ago. Young people, believe in yourself even when your leadership is unsure about your abilities. After all, my own mom, who loves me very much, wasn't very supportive of a lemonade stand. And when I told her I wanted to start We Cancerve shortly after that, she wasn't really supportive. To be fair, I understood her lack of support because I was fighting cancer, and she was more concerned about my health than anything else. But I was persistent, and I had to prove constantly that I was serious about this work. Ask yourself, what's the risk in letting them try? What's the harm in letting them plan and lead? Sometimes you have to resist the need to be in control of everything. Young people, make sure you understand not only the people you want to help, but the people who need to work with you in order to get to the people you want to help. For me, I had to understand that my customers really wanted a good tasting cup of lemonade. My friends and I came up with a unique recipe. We put a lemon head candy at the bottom of each cup. We were convinced that would make a difference. My friend Addison had the idea to let patrons know why we were selling lemonade. She told passing cars it was to raise money for kids with cancer. Cars filled our streets. Adults, take a lesson on diversity of approach from this. Sometimes you have to be willing to do something unheard of. Young people, let's look at my friend Addison again. She and my friends Lexi and Heaven embraced this project like it was their own. Don't be afraid to take a buddy with you to build the plans you have in mind. In fact, I did that day I presented a plan to Anna's house in 2015 about a 4-week summer camp I created for them, and I couldn't believe they actually accepted my proposal. To the adults out there, be slow to write young people off as cute and smart for our age. We have so much to contribute now. We just need to benefit from your experience and knowledge. For my last piece of advice, I want to speak directly to the adults. Although your precautionary mindset is valued and necessary, let us young people have a seat at the solution table to bring the focus back on the solution. If there's a problem we run into, we don't get stuck on what we can't do or don't have. We immediately search for a new way of solving the problem. There is so much value in the ideas, passion, and persistence of young people.